I'm Carlos Garcia. This is my presentation. These fine folks are my audience. So something that I want you guys to imagine that your brain is a car, right? And this car has an engine of a Ferrari, but has the brakes of a tricycle. And now imagine you're driving that car down the freeway with a blindfold on, and somebody else is telling you directions. That is what ADHD feels like. At least what it feels like to me. And why this is important and why this is linked to communication is because ADHD is becoming more recognized as a neurodivergent disorder. And something I want you to take away from this speech is how people with ADHD communicate and the barriers that they encounter and how they communicate. The credentials that I have for giving this talk is that I was diagnosed with ADHD in the 2nd grade, so I am now 19 and I have over 10 years of experience with ADHD. Some of the preview of my points are basically going to revolve around some of the barriers and how people with ADHD kind of correct themselves in a way when they're communicating. So one of the things that I'd like to highlight, the first point I'd like to highlight is one of the barriers with the communication of ADHD. This is with one of the things is low dopamine receptors. In a study by Xian Huan, basically a study deducing that like people with ADHD have low dopamine receptors, so they're always searching for the next thing in the conversation and are probably a few steps ahead. And in a study by Bernice Zaya, she does a study of people or students with ADHD versus students without ADHD, and she finds that students with ADHD have cadences that are different because their brains are trying to catch up to, or their mouths are trying to catch up to their brain. And so another factor with this is that they often interrupt, which is moving on to our next point. And the thing is, not with low dopamine levels, there's also trouble registering other people's like emotions, kind of thing. And in Cage's study / work, emotional understanding of children with ADHD, she has a study where she shows the children a series of images relating to just like people and like basically the expressions on their face. And with the kids with ADHD had a harder time recognizing the emotion that the person was displaying, and also had a harder time recognizing the like different objects and stuff. So your brain has a different almost processing speed, kind of in a way, or output of that processing speed. And so with that in mind, how that relates to communication is that sometimes you have a trouble knowing when to start and to stop a thought. And basically you don't know when the person's going to be stopping their thought or ending it. So you kind of interrupt sometimes. Also, you tend to speak really, really fast also on that notion. And you kind of will give misinformation in an indirect way because your mouth hasn't caught up to your brain. Which will lead into our next point, how ADHD people kind of almost correct themselves in communication. In a study in the Journal of Autism and Development, there's this idea of masking / camouflaging, which is basically like, imagine you are a speaker in like a music speaker, and you're cranked up to 11, and you can't turn down to 11, so you put a filter over that speaker so your audio is suppressed and is like a lower volume. That's kind of what masking is, kind of turning down your ADHD kind of like quirk kind of thing. And basically in the study it's highlighted that people do this for a variety of reasons: to be taken seriously, to communicate effectively, to make other people feel comfortable, to fit in and stuff like that. And it's basically just for almost during formal and non-formal settings, people that know you and people that don't. And with all these like struggles and barriers of communication, we can see the complexities of communicating with ADHD. And with all the things that we've examined, we can tell how these people communicate and the difficulties that they have communicating. And with all this in mind, I think that you can walk away with the idea of speaking to these people with ADHD and seeing that it's not just being lazy or whatever these other excuses that people try to put on ADHD. Thank you for watching my speech or listening to my speech. These again are the people that are observing my speech. Thank you.